Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name's Ian Deakin of ATIS, and together with Bill Trust of AT&T and Xiaojiao Mei from Comcast, where we wanted to provide actually an overview of the work we've been doing on the ATIS Quantum Safe Communication and Information Initiative to present, really, I suppose, not just the work, but some of the considerations to the NGA and the work that you're doing to secure 6G. Really to provide, I suppose, the background to how we got started and why we did this is most people really have been reading articles around the potential threat for current cryptography from quantum computers in the future, but we really wanted to quantify that in terms of how real it was. When was this likely to happen, and when was it going to be a problem? What challenges that is going to present to security and cryptography, of course, going forward. But more specifically, what that meant in terms of changes for communication service providers going forward to be resistant or quantum resistant in the future to this potential threat. So during our investigations of actually looking into this, it became evident as well that there's other quantum technologies that could be used actually to improve security in ways that could not be provided by enhancements in cryptography alone. So, we'd like to talk a little bit about some of those technologies as well during this. So, in the beginning, we reached out to across our membership to look at which organizations were actually active in this area, and we got a community together, and we started our first meeting in May of 2021. So that's really the background to it. So actually, yeah, you can see here that here are some of the organizations that have been active really over the last 6 months in actually developing the work. And in the beginning, really, we wanted to define what was the scope of what we wanted to achieve realistically in the short term. So certainly, obviously, by our demographic, we wanted to be able to actually bring the community together to look at, from a North American perspective, what the industry needed to do to be quantum safe, and the impacts, obviously, to the North American community. Primarily, building awareness of what the quantum security risks were, and to educate other members as well in this area and the technologies. And actually, part of that awareness is this presentation actually that we're giving today, is really to educate what we found, I suppose, where we're at in that timeline, and what needs to be done, but specifically, what the telecoms industry needs to do to be quantum safe. And then based on that research and work that we've been doing, how can we influence global standards really in terms of what mitigating strategies or technologies need to be deployed to ensure that communications infrastructure will be resistant to this quantum threat in the future. And then last part is really, how can we create an evolution path forward for quantum safe communications networks in the future. And again, part of that is educating the NGA about that, and how we can share some of our information so that you can build that into your roadmap going forward. So today, actually, we've delivered a white paper. It's available at there's actually a URL behind this presentation that actually explains how communication networks need to be prepared for the quantum future. We've also been collaborating with a number of organizations, one in particular, the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. It's a US-based consortium funded by NIST, looking at quantum technologies and actually how to actually promote the US in advancing those quantum technologies across all industries, not communication services. So really, that's the background. I'd like to hand over to Bill, and Bill can give you more details around, the technology and some of the implications.
So Ian mentioned, I've got the fun part of this presentation. I get to talk a little bit about quantum computers, the impact to our security from quantum computing, and a little bit about some of the mitigating technologies that they're looking to at the moment. So I'm not going to make any assumptions about what people know about quantum computers or what they don't know. So it might be somewhat trivial for some of you, but maybe some of you haven't heard about it. So hopefully it's not too advanced from that perspective. Somebody to start and say, in a nutshell, a quantum computer is a device that makes use of phenomena from quantum mechanics, namely superposition and entanglement, And using these capabilities, it can offer a huge leap forward in solving certain types of problems. And I want to emphasize certain types of problems, not all problems, because there's a common misnomer today that quantum computers will be able to solve every single problem that's out there. That is not true. And to some respect, that's good news for data encryption, which I'll talk about here in just a little bit. So we have yet to really fully understand the capabilities of quantum computers, as we only have very small, noisy, intermediate scale quantum computers, or NISQ computers. As I was saying, we love our acronyms in this business. But it's only a matter of time before we have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer capable of breaking current public key encryption algorithms such as RSA and elliptic curves, and to a much lesser extent, some of the symmetric key encipherments like AES. But basically, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer will be capable of cracking current public key encryption in a matter of days, hours, minutes, or do I dare even say seconds, compared to the time it would take our most advanced supercomputers these days, which is probably on the order of thousands of years, or maybe even millions of years, depending on the size of the key. But even though we don't have any large-scale quantum computers at the moment, there is another problem that we need to be aware of, and that's something called the harvest now and decrypt later problem, where nefarious entities could be collecting encrypted data in order to decrypt it later. So not all data has a shelf life, which I'll discuss later in this presentation. But as a result, it's vital that we start to look and plan for new approaches in securing our information, such as the new post-quantum encryption algorithms, which are currently being explored by NIST, quantum key distribution, entry as a service, using quantum random number generators, and something I love, something called quantum entangled networks, and I'll touch upon those briefly in this presentation. So a lot of keywords here. All right, next slide, Sarah. All right, so what can be affected? So as I just mentioned, RSA and elliptic curves, so those encryption algorithms based on something called prime number factorization or discrete logarithm problem, which is a certain type of mathematical problem, that we subject to quantum attack due to something called Shor's algorithm, which was developed by Peter Shor way back in the 1990s. But what Shor did was prove that we could solve these type of problems in linear time on quantum computers. So to put this in perspective, right now, as I mentioned, these supercomputers use classical methods, and the best approaches to prime factorization right now is sub-exponential in nature, so slightly better than brute force attacks. But Shor's algorithm can solve these type of problems in linear time, so a huge speed improvement there. So, and then from the symmetric key encipherment, as I mentioned, things like AES, for example, there's another algorithm called Grover's algorithm, which is a way for using quantum computers to search unstructured data. Fortunately, from the encryption perspective, this only offers a quadratic speed or linear speed improvements, which is far, far less than the huge speed improvement we see from Shor's algorithm. So, but again, just to make sure everybody understands that public key encryption is at much bigger risk than symmetric key encipherments are. So RSA and elliptic curves and AES are currently the most prevalent encryption algorithms, and hence quantum computing will have a major security impact on such things as online shopping, online banking, secure email, secure web browsing. I don't know about most folks on this call, but these days you can look up your health records online, so all that's going to be at risk. So really the bottom line here is that no online system can be trusted anymore because key establishment and key exchanges can be breached. No online presence can be trusted to be authentic because digital signatures can be hacked, and transaction non-repudiation is gone. So think of examples like blockchains where they use public key encryption to sign the transactions. All right, so currently there are no large-scale quantum computers, or as we even call them, cryptographically relevant quantum computers capable of breaking public key encryption, but when might we expect one? So this is an interesting slide because there's a company called the Global Risk Institute in collaboration with another company called Evolution Q, and you're gonna hear me talk about Michaela Muska here in just a little bit. He is the CEO of Evolution Q, but they produced this survey, and they've done it for the last several years now. This one is the most recent one, which came out roughly in the January timeframe of this year. Here they actually polled 46 experts on the likelihood of a significant quantum threat to public key cybersecurity, specifically RSA with a 2048-bit key. If you look at this slide, you can see that in approximately 15 years, half the experts think there's a greater than 50% chance, and half of them think there's less than a 50% chance of a quantum computer, or I'll say cryptographically relevant quantum computer by that time. But the point here is that this is certainly within the 6G era. As a matter of fact, even if you look at the 10-year forecast here, you can see that roughly 15 out of the 46 experts think there's greater than a 50% chance of a quantum computer in the next 10 years. And let me just point out too that there's even a possibility, and I'll say non-zero probability here, of a quantum computer in the next 5 years. And one of the things I do is I follow quantum technologies quite fervently because I want to see what's happening in this space, and it seems like I'm hearing about breakthroughs almost every single day now. So stay tuned for things happening in this space. So a lot of huge progress in this. A lot of huge progress happening in quantum technologies. Okay, so do we need to worry about this now or later? Okay, so it's no secret that it takes time to migrate to new cryptographic techniques. A biggest example of this is think of SHA-1, which was banned in the US way back in 2010. And in 2018, when TLS version 1.3 was finalized, SHA-1 was still being used. I'm even saying SHA-1 is probably even being used today, in some situations, so which is kind of scary. And the other thing I mentioned earlier is we have to be aware of the harvest or steal information now and decrypt later problem that we're already facing today because bad actors like malicious nation states can, and I'm going to go out and say probably are, I want to be politically correct because I don't want to accuse anybody of doing anything, but anyways, they probably are collecting encrypted data to store it until quantum computers are powerful enough to decrypt it. So think of information that doesn't have a shelf life, right? Like intellectual property, health records, financial records, things like that, right? Those are all at risk of this harvest now and decrypt later problem. So Michaela Muska came out with this simple formula. Michaela is the CEO of Evolution Q, as I mentioned. He's up at the Institute of Quantum, he's at the Institute of Quantum Computing up at the University of Waterloo. But anyways, he's done a lot of work in this space. And he came up with this very simple formula where he defines X as being how long it takes or how long you need your cryptographic keys to be secure. Then he defined Y as the amount of time it would take to retool your infrastructure, basically the shelf life of your data, right? And then he uses the variable Z to measure how long it takes for a large scale or cryptographically relevant quantum computer to appear on the scene. And quite easily, if X plus Y is greater than Z, well then Houston, we have a problem here. So in my opinion, we really do need to start worrying about this problem now. So the answer is, do we need to worry? Yes, now. All right, so I mentioned there's some mitigating technologies out there right now being explored. So this slide kind of provides a brief overview of the different areas that they're looking to at the moment. So all these mitigation technologies address the Diffie-Hellman key exchange process in which public key cryptography is used to share a symmetric key in order to encrypt data in motion. So let me run through these. So the first one is a classical method of doing this, software-based. They're known as post-quantum encryption algorithms. Again, the classical computing algorithms, which are thought to be secure against quantum computing. So these are replacements for the current public key encryption based on a different type of mathematical problem based on searching algorithms, which are still believed to be a very difficult problem for quantum computers. So it would make these algorithms resistant to quantum computing. However, like RSA and elliptic curves, we can never really truly prove that these new algorithms are completely secure against cryptanalysis. So NIST has the responsibility for recommending new encryption algorithms, and they're in the process of vetting out these new algorithms. And we expect to see an announcement relatively soon, probably sometime this month, about algorithms they want to propose for standardization. We expect sometime around 2024 for them to come out with the final list for what they're recommending for post-quantum encryption. So the remaining technologies are all quantum-based, and there's some very positive features of quantum-based solutions. The first one is known as QKD, or quantum key distribution. It's purely a solution for symmetric key exchange using something, quantum mechanical property known as light polarization. So the actual encryption algorithm itself was actually proposed way back in 1984 by Bennett and Broussard. Unlike classical methods, QKD can be proven secure as observing a photon necessarily causes a perturbation resulting in a change of the polarization, which can then be detected. So this is a hardware solution. There's still quite a number of challenges yet that need to be overcome. One of them is endpoint authentication, and the other one is distance limitations. Although as satellite technologies come to fruition, I think the distance limitation will be less of a problem. And I know there's people working on solutions from the authentication perspective, but again, all this needs to be watched closely. And then we have quantum random number generators. So these are devices that use the property of superposition in quantum mechanics. Okay, so simply if a quantum particle is in a superposition state, if you measure it, it has an equal probability of obtaining any one of the possible states. So I like to think about this like flipping a coin in the air, okay? So while the coin is in the air, it's in some superposition of heads and tails. Okay, you have to use your imagination a bit here, but nevertheless, envision the coin spinning in the air, so it's hard to tell what state it's in, right? But once it lands, right, it takes on a definite state of either heads or tails with a 50% probability, assuming it's a fair coin, okay? So that's basically the premise behind quantum random number generators. So QRNG can be used as an entropy source for both classical and quantum-based encryption, as it does offer perfect entropy, which is much better than any of the current pseudo-random number generators. It can be also used as a one-time pad, and I'm aware of vendors who are working on entropy as a service, in which they have potential solutions for the Diffie-Hellman problem. Okay, so this is a replacement for Diffie-Hellman. So a lot of things happening in that space. And then last but not least, and probably one of my favorites, is something called QEN, or quantum entangled networks. This uses the quantum mechanical property of entanglement, whereas Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. So, okay, so this is a process known as quantum teleportation, in which information can be securely teleported between endpoints. Now, I just want to point out before some of you Trekkies out there get too excited about this, all right, this is about transporting information, not matter, okay? But who knows, some days, maybe someday we will have the transporter that we see in Star Trek. Anyways, although this technology is in the very early stages of exploration and development, with many technological challenges ahead, in my opinion, this will be the network of the future and potentially feasible within 6G era, hopefully sometime within that period. So, like other methods in quantum technologies, QN can be proven secure thanks to the no cloning principle in quantum mechanics. I apologize, typically you have to talk a bit about quantum mechanics when you talk about these solutions, but again, hopefully it's not too in-depth. But regardless of the mitigating technologies, and again, due to the uncertainty in these different types of mitigating technologies and potential technological breakthroughs in quantum computing, it's in my opinion that we need to implement any solutions in a crypto agile fashion, okay? So as I mentioned earlier, it takes a very long time for industry to adopt new encryption techniques, and we ought to take advantage right now of architecting security solutions that are nimble, all right? So a couple examples here. So we do develop, let's say we have QKD solutions right now, but this quantum entangled networks does come to fruition sometime in the 6G era or beyond. You're gonna wanna be able to swap to different technologies more quickly. And then another really powerful example is a few weeks ago, the Rainbow digital signature algorithm, which was one of the NIST finalists, been around since the early 2000s, a well-studied problem, was actually hacked a few weeks ago, so we were able to get the keys back out of it. So in the advent, we have a compromise. Even in the new post-quantum cryptography encryption algorithms, we want to make sure that we have the ability to swap more quickly to different encryption algorithms. In other words, we want to be more nimble.
Well, I just wanted to put a slide up just to show some examples, really. I suppose that everything within the communications infrastructure is protected by some form of cryptography that shields, you know, all of the information that travels the internet protocols for session establishment, authentication, encryption, etc. And all of those are going to be affected, as Bill indicated, from whether they be symmetric key encryption or asymmetric key encryption as well. And here's just really some examples. I don't want to go into them in detail, but you know, they're all going to be affected, not just because, you know, some of them will have to have a new post-cryptography protocol to replace the PKI infrastructure that's there today, but equally, you know, those that are using symmetric key encryption, you know, you'll see in some reports that, you know, we can just increase the key length to actually then secure that, but that has actually adverse effects on performance, be it maybe even constrained devices like IoT devices to go from AES 128 to 256 as an example. That you know, that obviously there's processing power requirements to process the encryption decryption, so that puts an overhead, and you know, if we look at maybe 5G communications and ultra low latency type communications, what impact that might have on ultra low latency communications. And equally, as Bill indicated as well, is that, you know, what is the impact of maybe increasing the key length if the device is actually not able to actually give true entropy? So, you know, you're thinking that you're actually securing the protocol by increasing the key length, but you've actually a poor source of entropy, randomness, to, you know, being the seed for the key. So the net effect of actually increasing that overhead is not giving you anything more secure as well. So all of these things need to be looked at. There's certainly they haven't been realized today. You know, there's been some very broad brush sort of increases in protocols, certainly within 3GPP, to indicate that, you know, increase in the key length, but, you know, not some of the studies around, well, what is actually the real implications of that, and, you know, on certain applications, certain sort of capabilities of the network, and potentially other areas of devices, and whether or not, you know, they can really be upgraded at all, or whether or not you just have to wait until their end of life to actually transition them going forward in the future. So as Bill alluded to, you know, the term that's being used is, you know, how crypto agile really is the infrastructure, devices, you know, your services, to be able to actually transition to something new that actually will make them quantum resistant in the future. So I'd like to hand over to Xiao now, as she's done quite a lot of work in this particular area, and she wants to just give unfortunately a brief overview of that, but certainly she's done quite a lot of work in that, and quite an extensive description of that in the report that we've provided.
All right, cool, thank you. So crypto agility refers to the ability to replace crypto primitives, algorithms, or protocols with limited impact on operations and with low overhead. It is of particular importance in the current environment, since the algorithms were expected to last for decades, but this is no longer true, as the attack surface and speed of innovation increases. So while there are many libraries and solutions available to help with the quantum transition, none of the solutions have been tested with a real quantum computer. And so this will be an iterative process, and the system themselves need to be crypto agile rather than designed around a protocol or algorithm. And currently, many systems are not designed to support rapid adaptations of new crypto primitives and algorithms. So this requires not only the replacement of algorithms, but also updates to the protocols, hardware, dependent operating systems, and procedures. And other non-security issues, such as adoption rate, backward compatibility, and performance, must also be considered. Switching to Agile cryptography will not only address the difficulties and demands in a much easier, secure, and efficient manner, but it will also provide a comprehensive platform for cryptographic development for many years to come. And one of the ways to combine all the factors into a broader crypto agility strategy is to use a crypto agility risk assessment framework. So the first step for that would be to identify the driver for change, which could be due to compliance, new technology, or new vulnerability. And in this case, it is a need to prepare ourselves to be quantum resistant. And the phase 2 would be to look at the inventory of assets affected. So the post-quantum crypto are meant as a replacement for the public key algorithms. And the symmetric key and hash algorithms will simply need larger key sizes and larger outputs to maintain their current security posture. So this also means that not all assets will be similarly impacted. In some cases, the assets will be phased out before the migration is required and are not within the scope of consideration. And the third phase is to look at the risk estimation. So the typical formula is a combination of probability and impact. In the case of quantum, however, there's a lack of information on the exploits. So the formula for risk will be based on the timeline and cost. The timeline is based on Mosca's model, and the cost can also vary widely, depending on the amount of assets and organization. The cost to migrate will decrease over time, as new tools are developed that makes integration of quantum-safe algorithms easier. And even existing tools will undergo improvements as more entities try to use them in practice. And in terms of mitigating the risk, the organization can choose to accept the risk, phase out the asset, or secure the asset. If the organization chooses to secure the asset, one can use existing solutions utilizing crypto agility, compensating control, or quantum-resistant cryptography. And lastly, we have the organization roadmap, which should be based on the security mitigation strategy. So if we choose to accept the risk, then the roadmap would be to continue enforcing existing management plans, but include an exception process for the assets in question. If the choice is to phase out the asset, Then we need to review alternative solutions and include requirements around the post-quantum security in the guideline. If the choice is to secure the asset, then it is important to benchmark test which post-quantum crypto is appropriate for the asset. And by taking a risk assessment approach, we can provide clear, actionable guidance for risk mitigation strategy, and in particular, identify areas that need to be prioritized for protection and where it may be reasonable to accept the risk.
So I just wanted to summarize actually some of the points that we've already mentioned, really, that would be considerations for the NGA, really to ensure that, I suppose, how to be secure in the 6G era. First is the timeline of a cryptographic relevant computer is certainly within the time frame of when we envisage 6G to be rolled out. Some of the protocols that are actually currently being investigated by NIST for post-quantum cryptography are not going to really be standardized for the next 2 years. So certainly I think that IETF and some of the other standards bodies won't be able to actually categorically define what changes are going to be made to some of their protocol stacks until those standards are ratified by NIST. And as we heard earlier, one of those candidates, the Rainbow, has actually already been compromised. So I haven't seen anything from NIST to date about what needs to be done to sort of upgrade that or mitigate challenges, or whether it will still be retained as one of the candidates going forward. Certainly, I think 6G needs to be quantum resistant by design. As we heard, really, in terms of its design abstractions, all of the underlying sort of algorithms, protocols, and its design sort of parameters need to be crypto agile, because as we've seen, if as an example that the Rainbow protocol had been implemented and it was decided that was not secure going forward, how would you be able to change that out quickly? So certainly I think that there needs to be considerations within the design of the infrastructure for crypto agility, because it's highly probable that we will see that protocols will be compromised in the future. As I mentioned as well, symmetric key encryption, we can actually increase the key length, but unless there's a good true source of entropy, that has potential issues as well. So with a true source of entropy, potentially we don't need to increase the key length incrementally. And the performance implications, of course, on post-quantum cryptography, it's actually going to increase the performance and what impact that will have on devices and low latency communications as well. And last really is, how to embrace these new quantum technologies to further enhance security in terms of, potentially eavesdropping detection, etc., as we mentioned earlier. So I think those are the considerations that certainly we feel that NGA should be looking at in terms of the investigations in what needs to be implemented within 6G to make it quantum resistant in the future. And as I said, this is only a snapshot of some of the information that we've been looking at, and you can read more about it in the white paper, which is available to download from the ATIS website. And if you'd like to be involved in the ATIS work in quantum safe communications and information initiative, please contact us at ATIS and we'll be happy for you to join. Take care now.